A cryptocurrency billionaire spent $12 million trying to get Carrick Flynn elected in Oregon's new congressional district. In the end, he came up a distant second in the Democratic primary.
Is that an example that money can't buy you love?
And speaking of contentious congressional races, Southwest Washington's Jamie Herrera Butler has a couple of primary challengers, including one backed by Trump. She's also featured in a new book about the January 6th insurrection.
She confronted the leadership of her own party in the House and said, perhaps you and the Senate leadership should go to the president and urge him to resign.
Plus, the barcode issue on Clackamas County ballots is not the first time we've seen something like this. Remember hanging chads? Those cause problems in Oregon, too.
Tug at them, tear them, whatever you need.
Here's the story. I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there on your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or leave us a voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. Before we jump into politics, and don't worry, we will get there, we're going to spend some time talking about homelessness. It is an issue that we cover day in and day out, and for good reason. This crisis touches every corner of our community. There are tents on the sidewalks and sprawling encampments in our parks. People are hurting, and as taxpayers, we're spending tens of millions of dollars trying to deal with it all. Several weeks ago, KGW's investigative team decided to do a deep dive on the topic, and that brings us to One Day. It's a documentary that premieres in about an hour right here on KGW. Our crew spent 24 hours capturing the street-level response to Portland's homeless crisis. Kyle Aboshi is here with a preview.
You know, we wanted to help people understand how this crisis unfolds each and every day. So for One Day in April, we had crews spread out across the community. We documented what life is like for those experiencing homelessness and those providing them support. We went inside shelters, tents, RVs, a fire station, a hospital emergency room. And it just so happened that President Biden, he visited Portland that day. For me, the most impactful stories came from the people we met, like a woman sleeping in a shelter with her dog. Here's a portion of the documentary.
Good morning, everybody. It's 5:50. I got breakfast sandwiches, hot coffee, got some decaf.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I've been in this shelter from the beginning when it first opened. I'm 60 years old. I'm the oldest one in here. This shelter actually is, you don't understand, this shelter is a royal palace for me. Even though we're sleeping in a mat, I call this a twin bed. Not a mat, but a twin bed. Okay, let's go. This is our everyday routine, every day. This is what we do. By 6 o'clock, I have to be out of here because my schedule is at 7 o'clock. Let's go. I have to hurry up and go to work. Let's go, B. In Pearl District, there's a lot of empty apartments. It's just too expensive for other people to afford it. I work for Rite Aid and I'm a floor supervisor. That is a regular 9-to-5 job. I don't look like I'm homeless, but I am.
Kyle, you mentioned the president came to town on that day. Did it mess up your plans?
Yeah, that was unexpected. I mean, we had things pretty well planned out. And then we got the word that the president would be visiting the same day we scheduled to do this shoot. Initially, you know, we thought about maybe pushing things back a little bit, but ultimately decided let's just roll it into the documentary. And it shows, again, how tricky this project was. We literally had one day to shoot, and whatever happened, happened. But I'm pleased things worked out, and I certainly hope you'll check it out. I think it's an eye-opener, and hopefully it'll help advance the conversation about homelessness in a thoughtful way.
Thanks, Kyle. I can't wait to watch it. Be sure to watch the documentary with me, One Day, Responding to Portland's Homeless Crisis. Again, it airs tonight at 7 o'clock right here on KGW. Let's turn to the primary election now and results from Oregon's new 6th Congressional District. If you live in this area, I'm sure you've been bombarded with TV ads and mailers because there was a lot of money pumped into this primary. On the Republican side, Mike Erickson won with almost twice as many votes as State Representative Ron Noble, who came in second. Erickson outspent him by a lot as well. He spent more than $673,000 compared to Noble's $84,000. But the real money in this race on the Democratic side went to candidate Carrick Flynn. A cryptocurrency billionaire spent more than $12 million to support his campaign. But in the end, it did not work. State Representative Andrea Salinas won the primary with about twice as many votes as Flynn, and by the way, a lot less cash. I talked to political consultants from both parties about that.
Is that an example that money can't buy you love?
I think it absolutely is, at least on the Democrat side, right? On the Republican side, I do think money did buy that campaign. But when you look at, Carrick Flynn and Andrea Salinas, I don't know that her name recognition would have been that much higher with the broad depth of voters that are in that district, geographically speaking. But the message that they were able to get out and the attention about Carrick Flynn's campaign became less about him and more about the money behind it. You never want that as a candidate, ever. Whether you're running for city council or, congressional district, you want to be able to talk about the issues. So it became a distraction that I think worked in her favor. Not to mention, she's known and well supported by a number of voters. On the Republican side, you had Mike Erickson, who hasn't been involved in Oregon politics for a long time. I was extremely surprised to see that he was running this time, but I got, 6 mailers and saw the signs and had the advertisements. And if you are a voter who's not familiar with people in that district, the person's name you see more tends to be the one you trust to be more credible and get that vote. But, I said last night, I called that completely wrong and just made an assumption that, Ron Noble would get the nomination. But I think, Mike came in late and spent a lot of money to reach voters and did it well.
Andrea Salinas has to be the superstar of this race. I mean, if there's a poster person who is really has to be highlighted as someone who's run a superior campaign in the face of overwhelming odds, it's Andrea Salinas. I mean, she took, a fragmented kind of like a vote on the left against $12 million of money thrown at her or more. And she knit together a positive campaign. Now, great. Again, we're talking about primary voters in a Democratic primary coming out looking for a progressive woman to vote. And that happened throughout the ballot. But Andrea Salinas found a way to kind of make a campaign that really connected with voters in the face of overwhelming odds. It's a superior performance. People will be, I think, thinking about that race for a long time. I hope that they learn part of the lesson that you're talking about, Pat, and that is that Oregon's not up for, just up to the highest spender. But I think we're going to test that over and over again over the next couple of months.
There's also a different congressional race that we'll be following in August. This one involves the Southwest Washington congressional seat of Republican Jamie Herrera Butler from Battleground. She was one of just 10 Republicans who voted to impeach then President Trump, and Trump has now endorsed her Republican challenger, Joe Kent. 2 political reporters from the New York Times talk about Herrera Butler in their new book, This Will Not Pass. I got a chance to sit down with them earlier today.
Reporters Jonathan Martin, there with the plaid coat, and Alex Burns have covered national politics for 15 years. They're based in Washington, D.C. In their new book, This Will Not Pass, Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future, they write about the significant test democracy underwent during 2020 and 2021. The reporters got firsthand accounts of closed-door meetings among Republicans after the attempted insurrection of January 6th. They documented how Southwest Washington's Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler argued to leadership that Trump should resign.
Nobody was more emphatic in the days after January 6th about calling Trump to account, in private at least, than Jamie Herrera Butler. She confronted the leadership of her own party in the House and said, perhaps you and the Senate leadership should go to the president and urge him to resign. Tell Donald Trump get out of office before January 20th to stop this political emergency in America. We know that she said that at a private House GOP meeting shortly after January 6th. That was discussed, as you also heard from Kevin McCarthy talking about doing the same thing, telling Trump to resign. That's where this was. That's the height of this crisis after January 6th. Donald Trump represents a clear and present danger to American democracy. How do we get him out of office before his term expires? And to go from that sort of concern, that alarm that Jamie Herrera Butler had, to basically silence about Donald Trump or anything surrounding January 6th tells you a lot about the state of GOP politics and what it takes to get renominated in the Republican Party today.
Part of the book also deals with the riots in Portland, made worse when President Trump sent federal forces in to defend the federal courthouse. They detail how Governor Kate Brown's administration got warnings from some inside the Trump administration that things were likely going to get worse.
When people in the Brown administration, hearing from people in the Department of Homeland Security, you got to proceed with caution here, because not everybody here, meaning the Trump administration, not everybody here wants to de-escalate this. And that's a really sort of stark warning to get from inside a president's own inner circle, that we seem to be heading towards open conflict between people on the streets of a major American city, federal agents, local and state law enforcement, and the president himself might actually not want to take down the temperature for political purposes.
And certainly that is exactly what happened. When the federal agents came in, things just took off. And then we saw in the news conferences Portland being called out specifically for anarchy and all that.
And that's by design, right? That's not the president sort of mismanaging a situation, unfortunately, with some sort of uncomfortable consequences. No, that's escalation for political purposes.
Exploiting unrest and really sort of tragic events explicitly for his own political gain.
The Oregon governor's race has been narrowed down to 3 candidates. Now the battle for endorsements and funding begins.
So I am really proud to endorse her.
That I will be competitive in this race financially.
The question is, what key supporters will the unaffiliated Betsy Johnson take away from her opponents when the story continues?
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com or leave a voicemail. Give us a call, 503-226-5090. Well, if you're sick of hearing us talk about elections, sorry, we've still got a long ways to go till November. The 3 women running for Oregon's next governor are now in a race to get endorsements. Today, a few big names threw their support behind some of the candidates. First up, Nicholas Kristof, who was disqualified from the governor's race himself, endorsed Democrat Tina Kotek. Here's Blair Best.
Today, the Democratic nominee for Governor Tina Kotek and Nicholas Kristof toured this new recovery facility here in Southeast Portland. It's a site that directly ties into the work they both stand for and the change that Kotek hopes to accomplish if elected. Come on in. The doors to Fora Health, a brand new recovery center, are open for those living on the streets struggling with addiction.
And we will be able to do outpatient for 1,000 patients at a point in time.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. We need more treatment facilities like what Fora is offering. You walk in here and you immediately feel that this is a place where people can find recovery.
So we do a lot of fentanyl, a lot of alcohol.
Democratic nominee Tina Kotek was joined by former New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof as they saw firsthand the impact this facility is having on the state's addiction crisis.
I think it's a national scandal that we were losing 250,000 Americans a year to overdoses and alcohol, to addiction, 250,000, and that our response is so pathetic.
Kristof, who grew up in Yamhill County and attempted his own run for governor before being ruled ineligible, is now backing Kotek because he believes she's the progressive candidate Oregon needs.
Look, Oregon faces huge challenges, and I want a governor who can work really seriously to address those challenges.
He's talking about homelessness, education, and addiction, 3 issues Kotek has a history of facing head-on.
I'm honored to have his endorsement. We have to work on these things together.
Kotek believes this endorsement will help her win come November, especially when it comes to securing a rural vote.
It's going to be good for the state because we both share the same concerns and values of what we want this state to look like.
So a lot of people talk about the change they want to see, but we walk outside every day and we see tents all over the streets. So what is it that you're really going to do to try and incite change if elected?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's unacceptable that anyone's living on the street. That's not how we want our state to be, and it's going to take a variety of solutions, but I have a plan that says on the first 10 minutes of my administration, we know what we're going to do.
Which is getting those living on the streets into safer places like recovery centers and eventually into permanent housing.
But it's going to take the next 10 months as well of like making sure we can have more shelters, more places for people to go.
I look at her rivals and I don't see that kind of leadership.
It's going to be a tough race in November. Historically, we're going to have 3 women running, but the 2 other folks in the race are conservative. They are not as interested in raising up the opportunity for every Oregonian to be successful.
Up next for Kotek, she plans to work alongside Christoph these next few months ahead of November to instill hope in Oregonians and fight for a brighter future. In Southeast Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
Now on to Betsy Johnson, the unaffiliated candidate for governor who's expected to get a lot of support and make this a real 3-way race. She got a pair of big endorsements today from both sides of the aisle. Former Oregon Governor Ted Kulongoski, a Democrat, and former Oregon Senator Gordon Smith, a Republican, say they are both supporting Betsy Johnson. Here's what she told us about that.
It means the world to me. I know both of those gentlemen. These are stewards of Oregon. And the fact that they would come together and one of them say, I'm a dedicated D, the other say I'm a dedicated R, but we're putting our partisanship aside in the interest of our state, just means the world to me. And that's the whole thesis of our campaign. We are trying to bring Oregonians together. I hope it's giving permission to Republicans and Democrats to step out of their partisan, rigid polarization and say, let's look what's good for Oregon. And the very fact that both the R's and the D's are shooting at me is indicative of the fact that, first of all, I've gotten their attention and that they know I've tapped into a nerve in Oregon where people are, this is the clarion call to do something different.
Johnson was a Democrat in the state legislature for decades, but she voted with Republicans on many issues. She's not only attracting endorsements, but also big donations. Nike founder Phil Knight, who usually gives money to Republicans, has pumped $1 million into Johnson's campaign so far. She's raised more than $5 million in total this year, much more than anyone else running for governor. The third candidate in this race, Republican Christine Drazan, did not get any big endorsements today. Still, she held a news conference this morning where she was asked if she's worried about Johnson taking endorsements or funding away from her.
I'm confident that Oregonians will recognize this opportunity to lead our state in a new direction, and that now that we are out of the primary and we have a nominee, and I'm standing here before you today accepting that nomination, that I will be competitive in this race financially.
Drazan was one of 19 candidates in the Republican primary and more moderate than many of her challengers. She won about 23% of the total vote. So the other question is, does she think she'll get the support of Republicans who voted for the other candidates?
Republicans across the state all raised their hand and said, I want to be a part of change. And the great thing about this process that we've all experienced is that we have more in common than our differences within the Republican Party and within my opponents in this primary. And I can tell you that I will do everything I can to unify Republicans, while at the same time reaching across the aisle to all Oregonians that are looking for change.
So you've heard from the 3 top women running for governor. What do you think of the candidates? Do you have a favorite? Who is it? Why? Are you undecided? Why again? Send us your thoughts. I'd love to see and hear what you're thinking about. Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call our phone number and leave a message. The number is 503-226-5090. Remember when Oregon had to deal with hanging chads during elections? Yeah, we did. And it wasn't just a Florida thing. We're taking a trip into the KGW vault when the story continues. Welcome back. I've seen your emails coming in. Keep them coming. You're talking about Nicholas Kristof and Clackamas ballots and more. We have a brief update, by the way, on the ballot debacle in Clackamas County. Not much progress being made there. The county may have as many as 60,000 ballots that need to be duplicated by hand because the barcodes on the ballots were not properly printed. The county initially sent 200 volunteers to the elections department to help out, but before they could get going, the workers had to have their identities and political party verified. Then 2 workers, each with different parties, were matched up and trained and then set to work. Late this afternoon, the Oregonian reported that all county employees are now being sent to work in the elections office. It's hard to tell how the effort is coming. I checked a couple of hours ago, and the county has not posted any updates on the number of ballots counted since Tuesday. Well, a lot of you have emailed us about this mess in Clackamas County. Dan wrote in, reminds me of the hanging Chad problem. Yes, indeed, Dan. I'm sure many of you remember that issue in Florida during the 2000 presidential election. But you know what? Turns out Oregon also used to have the same punch card system to vote. And yes, it did cause some issues. Here's something we found in the KGW vault from the 2002 midterm election.
Which candidate wins and which candidate loses.
Before the 2000 presidential election, most people thought Chad was the name of a person, not the name of a clingy rectangle that refuses to let go of a punch card ballot.
Punch cards got a really bad reputation in Florida.
While they started trouble in Florida, they're not picky about where they hang. In Washington County, election workers manually check all incoming ballots and pull out those with problems.
These ballots are all taken out of the machine countable group and they're duplicated onto a fresh ballot.
Election manager Jenny Kingsley says Washington County's double check process keeps vote counting accurate, and that the problem in Florida really wasn't the Chad.
It was not, in my estimation, really a problem with the count system as much as it was with the laws and procedures in Florida.
No matter, because soon those punch card ballot machines will sit forever silent, because in 2 years, federal funding will push this out of the ballot box.
We will be switching to optical scan because of the new federal bill that was signed very recently.
Meaning the power will be wielded by the number 2 pencil in every county across Oregon. Being a mail-in ballot state where ballot booths and punching equipment stand out of reach of most voters, elections officials say switching systems makes sense.
Hopefully by 2004 or at the latest by 2006, this county will be using a different type of ballot.
But some punch card voters worry that may be too late.
You know, I wonder how many votes are not being counted.
Helen Tucker says election officials may not be able to catch all those hanging Chads and warns voters to turn their ballots over.
And tug at them, tear them, whatever you need, because just scratching this one still has not come off. There it goes.
That's how we did it 20 years ago. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. Still ahead, how you can help your community. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to Community Warehouse. They're a furniture bank serving the Portland area. The organization collects donated furniture and works with social service agencies to distribute it to those in need. They also take cash donations that helps them buy things like beds, desks, chairs. So if you want to help out, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code there on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small or how big. That's the end of our program. Thanks for watching and being with us tonight. Remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.